Hey guys, Brent Build Show, talking today about Georgian moldings. How do you know? How can you tell, right? This is the first of a two-part video where the first part we're going to just talk about the history of it. How do you know? We're going to look at shapes, we're going to look at moldings and say, you know, that's how you can tell whether it's a Georgian molding. Then, second video, we're actually going to build a room. We're going to build a new Georgian room to show you how these parts and pieces come together. Come join me. So what is a Georgian molding? How do you know? What does it look like, right? Well, I've studied a lot of historic buildings, and as you know, that I went to North Bennett Street in Boston and studied historic preservation. But probably the best source for studying Georgian and federal interiors and architecture is the Winter Tour Museum. Now, I've talked about this book before, Traditional American Rooms, and it is a study of about 40 rooms at Winter Tour in the Georgian and federal style. Now, there's the Georgian style and then there's the Georgian period, and they're two different things. The Georgian period typically is what we define as that 1740 to 1780. And the 1780 because that's when the Revolutionary War is, and then after that we get into the federal style. So this Georgian period though means that you'll have some outliers, some things that will extend beyond those dates. So let's say the Georgian period is maybe 1730 into 1790, okay? So they're two different things. So before we get into the Georgian period, I wanted you to see what kind of an earlier colonial room looks like. This is called Vauxhall at Winter Tour. It's from New Jersey, about 1725. Notice the size of the fireplace, how big it is. This would have been a cooking fireplace. Notice the paneling on the fireplace wall, pretty typical detail. That mantel shelf was added later. You're starting to see some of the characteristics that happen in Georgian rooms and Georgian interiors, where you have a full paneled wall on the fireplace, and you're starting to see some of those details, but this is really pre-Georgian. Now, the first Georgian room we're going to study is a room called Cecil Bedroom. This is where Mr. DuPont slept. This is one of his favorite rooms. It's from Maryland, and you'll notice some key characteristics. This is a room with full paneled walls. Notice the paneling on that fireplace wall. It's actually raised off the wall. This is kind of a typical early Georgian room, right? You see a little bit of the columns and the pilasters there, the entablature going across. It's a little bit crude in that it isn't the kind of this pattern book beauty kind of style, which we'll see in other rooms, but this is an early room. The Marlborough Room at Winter Tour is from 1745. It too is from Maryland. Full paneled walls. Notice the fireplace, the full bolection molding. There is no mantel shelf. Notice the panels on the wall. They're raised panels. Okay, now this is in contrast to the federal period where you have flat panels. And so one of the characteristics of this era is that kind of raised panel, full paneled walls in nice rooms, and in lesser rooms you just see paneling on the fireplace wall. The Blackwell Parlor Winter Tour is 1763. Okay, it too has that same kind of raised panel system where the panel and the panel mold are actually raised above the kind of the flat surface behind. It has a federal mantle and mantle shelf added to it. And what the story is that the son bought the house or got the house from the father. He added a federal mantle shelf into this room. But without that piece in there, this is a very, typical Georgian room. Bolection molding around the fireplace, raised panel walls, kind of simple classical details. The Hampton Room is one of my favorite rooms. It's a room that we've actually produced a couple of times. It is a beautiful room. It's very balanced, right? You have this beautiful fireplace. You have the hutches on either side. They have these door header casing, tablature over top of each one, and then this beautiful cornice that wraps the room. This is a room that's actually inspired from pattern books. This is a room that was inspired, and we would know that the master builder or the homeowner had a Palladio's book or had one of the English pattern books and would have used it to help design this kind of room. The probably highest style, right, room at Winter Tour is called the Port Royal Room. It comes from a house outside of Philadelphia where the owner was actually from the Caribbean. Port Royal is where the name of the house comes from. This house probably has the highest style Palladian type of moldings and details that are kind of typical of that Georgian period. The house is built in about 1760s. And you'll see a characteristic that basically America was at that time was really gaining a lot of wealth and a lot of privilege, and so that you see really beautiful houses right before the American Revolution because there was new wealth in America. Now, this also is kind of appropriate because it would have been in a Philadelphia house, right? Philadelphia, Charleston, two of the richest cities in America at the time, right in the 1760s. So this one is real typical for us to study. What makes a Georgian molding Georgian, right? What are its characteristics? Well, I've got some drawings of some Georgian moldings here, and basically you're going to see kind of these three shapes. Remember, this Georgian molding is part of the architrave, and so we have this three-step kind of approach, but you'll notice that all these things have this similar backband. When this molding projects out like this, you see this kind of detail, right? All of these things are at least 2 inches by at least 5 inches. Here's another one from Philadelphia. It's the Blackwell Parlor. Big projection on the back, that really speaks this proud language. The Cecil Bedroom, here's the one where that little S curve, right, with the on the back band. But as we get bigger and as the room's heights change, right, this is from a room, this is Port Royal, this is the one that's in Philadelphia or outside of Philadelphia. This is 3 inches tall, 6 inches, 6.5 inches wide. The ceilings were 12 foot tall in that room. Here's one from South Carolina. This is the Charleston dining room, again, almost 12 feet tall, and again, these big projections. If you look at all these moldings, right, if they're all drawn on the same page, you see that they're all from the same family, that they've got this large projection on the back side, and they step down, there's a bead on the front, and so when you look at these moldings, you say, well, what is it? This is clearly kind of that Georgian style. Now, base moldings are the same way. Basically, you have at least 1 inch thick base molding, up to 2 and even 2.5 inches. Some of these get quite tall, but you'll notice the base cap all stays around between 4 and 6 inches, and then the base molding gets bigger. So those are the characteristics of the base molding. Now, the panel molding, kind of one of those other key details, is important too. Essentially, what you have is 2 different ways of doing the panel. Now, here's your style and rail here. There's typically a round little kind of a thumbnail molding, and then the panel comes up and does this. And this is what's called a raised panel mold. Sometimes there's a little bead here, sometimes there's a little step. The other way you see it is that the panel's actually sitting on top of the style and rail, and you'll see a molding like this that goes up, and then the panel actually is raised and sits right like this. So the panel and panel mold both sit on top of this style and rail frame versus this one, which is more typical for what we'll see in today's buildings, is this panel kind of set into a style and rail frame. So the typical details of that Georgian style, right? Understanding what a Georgian molding is and a Georgian room is these raised panels, these projected moldings, these bold shapes, these heavy shapes. And so if your client is asking you for a Georgian room or a Georgian styling, you need to make sure they understand that raised panel and those bold moldings, they really do stand out. And sometimes, or at least with our clients, they don't like to be as heavy as that, and they actually like more of a federal taste. So guys, hopefully you understand now kind of when I say that's a Georgian molding, you can look at it too and say, yeah, no, that is Georgian. You can see the characteristics and details. Look, follow me on Instagram and Facebook, and also when you go to the Build Show, be sure to sign up for the newsletter because there's a bunch of great content on there, and every week, every Friday, we're sending out a newsletter to let people know what the latest videos are so you can continue to follow me. There's a lot of great content there on classical buildings, traditional details. I'm Brent Hull. Thanks for watching.